Hi, researchers! Welcome to our discussion on the research methods. So, if you have already reached this segment of our online input, then I would assume that you already have a research topic in mind, you have already refined your research topic, and you must have already had a maybe draft of your conceptual framework. If you haven't done these things yet, then I would invite you to visit our related videos in this same YouTube channel. But if you've already ticked off all of those, then maybe it is high time for us to discuss about the research methods. Now, personally, this is a section of the research paper that I love to write this section mainly because it is a pretty straightforward section. It basically just explains what you are going to do and how you are going to do it, because at this point we're assuming that you're still preparing for the proposal hearing phase. So you are just going to outline in this section your plans, okay, as to how to go about answering your research question. This section will present proof of the reliability and validity of your study and is one of the favorite sections that perhaps your panelists would like to focus on when you present your proposal. Now, when you write this section of the paper, keep in mind to include the following four things. You will discuss what is your methodological approach. You will tell us what your data collection or your intended data collection method is, what is your intended method of analysis, and the justification of your methodological choices. Now, you don't have to put a subheading for each of these four. Just ensure that when you do the write-up, these four are present, okay? The answer to these four subsections are present in your research methods write-up. Okay, now let's talk about the methodological approach, because like we said, we have to discuss what is the methodological approach and we have to justify our methodological approach. Now, in order to do this one, let us borrow the research onion from Saunders, Lewis, and Thornhill in their book, Research Methods for Business Students. So we're basically going to anchor our discussion on this research onion. And just like how we peel an onion layer by layer, we shall also do that here. However, if you would notice, there are a number of layers we need to peel off. So in order to make sure that this discussion doesn't become too lengthy, we are going to split our discussion on this in half. So for this video, we are going to discuss all the way up to the methodological choice, and then we're going to reserve for the next video the data collection and data analysis layers of this onion. So I hope you're ready. Let's start with the research philosophy. Now, a research philosophy is basically how you view the way things are in the world. This is your view of the world. This will eventually underpin your chosen research strategy and methods. Take, for example, if we ask the question, oh, by the way, this is the first layer that we're going to peel off. And our research philosophies could either be positivism, realism, interpretivism, or pragmatism. We're going to take a look at all of these four, and I hope at the end of this subsection, you'll be able to identify which particular philosophy your research team has actually embraced. So take, for example, the question of what is your definition of happiness? How would you know that someone is happy? If perhaps you are saying that someone is happy, I will know that someone is happy by maybe asking them to answer a series of questions, asking them to rate how happy they are from a scale to 1 to 5, meaning to say, measuring their level of happiness, and that is how I would know. That is my definition. That is my measurement of happiness. Or perhaps you'd like to see happiness as something that is different from one person to another and will eventually be molded by their experiences and the situations that they are currently encountering. So, as to the question of what is happiness, a positivist type of researcher, if you are embracing positivism as a philosophy. Do you know that positivism was actually developed as a response of the religious and magical underpinnings during the Middle Age period? So it would seem like at that period, at that era, it seemed like people were so convinced with magic and religion and the unexplainable, and so positivism was born in order to address that one. Because positivism wishes to pierce through the magic of it all, positivism actually has as its landmark scientific rigor. It presents kind of like a counter, a counter to the superstition, a counter to the magic, a counter to the unexplainable. So that's why Its landmark is scientific rigor. According to the positivist, social phenomena can be studied, they can be measured, they can be understood like physical objects by using scientific methods. So therefore, when we talk about positivism, if you are basically saying that, well, happiness can be measured, it can be measured by some sense of instrument, you can design a research instrument in order to measure happiness, then you are actually embracing a positivism philosophy. Now, the other philosophy is called interpretivism. Interpretivism advocates that it is necessary for the researcher to understand the differences between humans in our role as social actors. The landmark of an interpretivist philosophy is on meanings, motivations, decisions, individual circumstances. According to the interpretivist, social behavior can never be summed in a mathematical formula. It's like saying there could be as many definitions to happiness as there are people. There is no one. It advocates for no one size fits all. Okay, it advocates for the nuances. It advocates for the individual interpretations of people. It's basically saying, I apologize. It's basically saying that social behavior is unique. And this is usually the cornerstone of qualitative studies. That's why they look at lived experiences, okay, because they are embracing an interpretivist philosophy. Now, the other two, which is realism and pragmatism, when you talk about realism, the essence is that whilst there is an external objective reality to the world that we live in, the way in which each of us interprets and understands it will be affected by our particular social conditioning. Okay, according to the realist, what the senses show us in reality is the truth. Okay, the objects have an existence independent of the human mind. A realist theory somehow embraces or is similar to positivism, that what is observed, what is seen, is the reality. That's why they measure, they empirically test. A pragmatist holds that the most important determinant of the research philosophy adopted is the research question, meaning to say, whatever gets you to answer the research question, then go for it. That's the pragmatist. It's like the idea of how the end justifies the means. Okay, so whatever gets you to the answer of the research question, then that's it. So those are the four research philosophies: positivism, realism, interpretivism, pragmatism. Generally, what would be clearly shown usually would be positivism, and this is normally embraced by those having a quantitative approach, and interpretivism, which is normally embraced by those having a qualitative approach. So we have already ticked off from our list the different research philosophies. Let's now move forward to the research approach. And to this, we call on deduction, abduction, and induction. So deduction is basically a top-down approach. So when you talk about a top-down approach, you start from the theory, then from the theory, you draw out the concepts, you come up with hypotheses, you gather the data, you test the hypotheses, and then you come up with a conclusion. Okay, an induction or inductive approach is a bottom-up approach in the sense that you may start with your observations, and then from your observations, you come up with a theory. Okay, so whether deduction or induction, both are acceptable. And there is what we call abduction as well. So abduction would go more into exploratory. Okay, it's used to explore a phenomenon. So meaning to say, you start with basically no expectations. You just like to observe patterns, identify trends, explore a phenomenon, and then eventually locate this one to a framework. Okay, so that is abduction. So deduction, which is top-down approach, induction, which is bottom-up approach, and abduction, which is exploratory in nature. Now we talk about the methodological choice, and to the methodological choice, we have whether you use mono-quanti, mono-quali, or multi-methods or mixed methods. So what do we mean by these things? So when we talk about the methodological approach, you can either have mono or multiple methods. A mono method would mean use purely quantitative or use purely qualitative. Okay, and usually for beginner researchers, we'd go for mono methods, okay, for beginner researchers. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't go into the multiple methods. So for multiple methods, you could either have a multiple method approach where you can have a multiple method quanti study and a multiple method quali study. So when you say multi-quanti, then that means you're still using a quantitative approach, but you're using multiple qualitative methods. Okay, say for example, you're conducting a survey at the same time performing a trend analysis, and at the same time, maybe for example, in the case of accounting, maybe performing some other ratio analysis, but it's all quantitative. Multi-method qualitative study means you're still using purely qualitative, but you're using different qualitative methods. Like maybe you're conducting an interview, maybe you are conducting, for example, an observation. Okay, so multiple methods, but all qualitative. Mixed methods, on the other hand, could have a mixed model research or a mixed method research, in which you can have multiple mixed models, or you can have both quanti and quali in one research. Okay, so this is arranged in accordance with simplicity to the more complex. If you wish to, like, make your lives really exciting, then I would strongly support your decision to come up with the multiple methods in terms of methodological choice. I'm pretty sure that that will make your research paper really exciting. Okay, so here's mainly the difference between quanti and quali, because whether you use mono or multi, we do have to take a look at these two. These are like the anchors to the methods we choose. So in terms of quantitative, like what we have mentioned, the usual research philosophy to this will be positivism, realism, or pragmatism. For the qualitative side, it's normally interpretivism. The research approach for quanti is usually deductive. Remember, we start from the theory, we come up with propositions, we come up with hypotheses, we define the variables, we give the operational definition. It's usually deductive. For qualitative, it's normally inductive. Okay, they start with the observations, and then from the observations, who knows, they may come up with their own theory. The characteristics of a quantitative approach is that normally for quantitative, they examine relationships between variables. These variables are measured numerically. That's why, if you may have noticed in our interactions, I normally ask you, how do you plan to measure this? How do you plan to measure that? Okay, because if you're using quantitative, the variables are measured numerically and they are analyzed using a range of statistical techniques. However, in terms of qualitative, the study's participants, what is important here is the participants' meanings and the relationships among those meanings. Okay, that's why we get to identify themes. For example, what are the common things that they have been saying? What is common to all of the participants, and that becomes a theme. Data collection is usually non-standardized, so that questions and procedures may alter and emerge during a research process that is both naturalistic and interactive. So in this sense, a qualitative approach is less rigid. Okay, the researcher can adapt, the researcher can change the questions in accordance with how the conversation is going on. So that's qualitative. The strategy normally for quantitative will be surveys. So that's why normally when we talk about research, the first thing you think about are surveys, meaning to say that's a positivist philosophy using a quantitative approach. So most usual strategy is a survey. For qualitative, you may see them using case studies, grounded theories, ethnography, or maybe textual analysis when they would like to maybe do an analysis on the laws or the decisions of the courts and things like that. So those are the usual strategies for qualitative. So that's the mono method. In terms of the multi methods, like what we said, multi method is more than one data collection technique, but still within either quanti or quali. Mixed methods, both quanti and quali, are combined in the research design. Okay, so we have ticked off philosophy, we are done with the approach, and we are also done with the methodological choice. Okay, but before we close off, let's take a look at the nature of your research project. Like what we have said, it may be exploratory. Exploratory is normally associated with the realist philosophy. Okay, exploratory would mean that you would like to observe the trends, okay, that you get to see in the data. It may be descriptive. And while descriptive is a worthwhile research endeavor, we again always caution our researchers to not simply be satisfied with the pure descriptive approach. There has to be an evaluative component, and it may also be explanatory. Okay, so this may be the nature of your research project. So we're done with philosophy, we're done with the approach, we're done with the methodological choice. So up next, we're going to talk about the data collection and data analysis layers of this research onion. So I hope to see you in the next video to talk about the rest of the research onion.